Welcome to the Private Practice Survival Guide podcast with your host, Brandon Seigel. I'm a published author, speaker, entrepreneur, and private practice strategist dedicated to transforming the way that healthcare functions. This podcast is all about empowering you to create the change you want to see. Let's dive in. Welcome back. Thanks for tuning in. Today, we're talking about HR strategies to expand your business into multiple states. Have you ever had that idea of what would it be like to expand to a neighboring state? Now, I want to recognize there's two different things. There's expansion in terms of service delivery, and there's expansion in terms of employment. And they're two different things. So I personally may only deliver services in one state, but I may have expanded my human resources where I'm able to support employees in different states. And it's interesting because I was noticing something on social media the other day, and I saw this practice, and this company was specifically seeking a remote therapist with all this experience and all this stuff, and a remote, not in a working, but they had to be located in Arizona. And this person commented and said, "Oh my gosh, I feel like I'm a perfect fit, but I am in Texas. Would you consider the perfect candidate in Texas?" And the company said, "Actually, I'm sorry. No, you have to be in Arizona." And for me, I almost was about to jump in and be like, like, don't miss out on talent. To expand into your HR operating basis into Texas would be literally easier than baking a cake. And so now, based on not recognizing how easy it is, I feel like they're missing out on a great candidate. Now, I understand they may be looking for this person to be in Arizona because they want to put on more in-person events with employees and whatnot, but don't miss out on top talent. So today, we're going to talk about the employment side of expanding your business into multiple states, recognizing that expanding your business into multiple states on a service delivery is different than just employee. So we want to look at both those, but today's focus is on the HR side. So why are we expanding to cross states? Two things. One is maybe you can find top talent in these other states. Another reason might be that there's a demand in which eventually you want to grow your service offering within that state. Ultimately, maybe you see a potential employee who's a perfect fit, but resides in a different area. Maybe you are ready to scale and you need a larger footprint to optimize your service reach. But here's the catch. Expanding isn't just about finding new clients or hiring new staff. Expanding is about navigating a web of state-specific HR laws, taxes, and regulations. What you need to know for one state is different than what another state might be. So even if we take two states that tend to be pretty employer-friendly states, let's take Texas and Florida. There are still differences between Texas and Florida. We still have to have different employee handbooks for those states. And even though they both have no state income tax, there are different regulations that we have to be aware of. So really understanding just because it's a employer-friendly state doesn't mean that there aren't things to look out for. So the other thing you got to recognize is when we expand our service delivery into other states, you may have different insurance contracts, different tax IDs you need to have, medical billing regulations, lots of variables. So again, we're looking at two different categories. One category is the HR side. The other category is the service delivery side. HR, we're looking at labor regulations, labor compliance, taxes, all of that. Services, we're looking at the compliance of payer rules, licensing rules. And again, so let's say that our service deliveries in the state of Arizona, but the employees in Texas, and let's say it's a telehealth visit, they must be licensed in both states. You must have work comp for both states. You must have all the liability that covers both states. So there are things to keep in mind. There are added expenses, and often we're short-sighted of this and we don't recognize. I know a couple practices that have hired in the state of Florida thinking that they don't have to do anything because there's no state income tax. Just because there's no state income tax doesn't mean there's not unemployment and other regulations. And it doesn't mean that you don't have to follow the FMLA and all the other guidelines, depending on your practice and location. So, one of the compliance factors I want you to look at when entering a new state is you need to look at the business registration and licensing requirements. You have to look at what is required when it is a remote employee and services are not physically getting delivered in that state versus when they are getting delivered. You need to register your business in that new state. If you're opening a new physical office or hiring employees there, you'll need to register as a foreign entity. Don't worry, that just means business operating outside its home state. For example, if your practice is based in Colorado, but you're hiring a clinician in Texas, you'll need to file with the Texas Secretary of State and get any required licenses. It's also helpful to utilize a multi state lawyer and CPAs that support that. So for me, I work with multiple lawyers, multi state lawyers, and CPA that can operate with multiple states because even my tax filing, I have employees in Maryland. Even though we're not delivering anything in Maryland, that employees there, and there's certain specialty filings that we have there. And the Maryland filings, I have employees in Idaho. Those Idaho filings are different. So just understanding that. So I want you to check the state's business and professional licensing boards. I want you to understand the compliance for private practice ownership, corporation structure, tax ID, NPI, as well as the human resources side. Human resources meaning what are the labor law requirements? What are the leave acts? Are there any paid leave requirements? Are there any minimum wage changes? Are there any liability insurance training requirements? Are there any certain states have even certain forms that must be filled out. What are the workers' compensation requirements for that state? So, right now, I'm trying to expand my employership to a new state, and I have my team researching what is the work comp requirements, what are the employment labor law requirements, all those different things. And get this, what makes this even more complex is this employee technically holds residency in a state that we already operate in, but they are going to be operating their job in a different state because their husband is in the services. Did you know there's different pass-throughs and regulations related to military spouses and families? So all these things are things that we have to look at. So they may be able to be taxed based on a state that they're a resident in, but we still have to follow labor guidelines and work comp and stuff for the state that they are doing the work in. And the other thing to think about is that some people live in one state and work in another. So you could be in Maryland, but work in DC. You could be in DC, but work in Virginia. So understanding all of those different nuances, I think, is really important. And the business registration and licensing side is crucial to look at. Another thing that you want to look at, number two, is payroll and tax compliance. So payroll gets tricky when you cross state lines, and not every payroll system has the capability to really handle a multi-state system. So you want to look closely. Each state has its own rules for income tax withholding, unemployment insurance, workers' compensation, payroll taxes. You'll need to register with the state's tax agencies and ensure your payroll system can handle that. For example, California requires clean drinking water for employees, while Minnesota has unique drug testing laws. There are some states that have specific regulations in specific municipalities. So, whether it's in a city ordinance or a county ordinance, like San Francisco has very specific court ordinances. Santa Monica has very specific ordinances. And get this, the city of Los Angeles has special ordinances. So I have people that live in Santa Clarita or areas that might not be part of the city of Los Angeles, but they drive and travel through city of Los Angeles for the work, and I have to follow those city guidelines as a result. These are all things that are really crucial. Although payroll softwares are helpful, I find that having a robust HR compliance solutions really crucial. So you will need an employee handbook for each state. You want to highlight both federal and state regulations. One software that can bring compliance data, resources, and updates is called Mineral. We do offer subscriptions of that software as part of our fractional HR solutions, but also your payroll system may actually be a reseller or offer that same subscription. But Mineral can be a good resource for you for both the labor law guidelines, the handbook building, and the LMS learning management system training opportunities. So, a lot there. The next thing I want you to look at is the wage and hour laws. Minimum wage, overtime, break time requirements vary by state. For instance, New York requires up to 56 hours of sick leave annually, while other states might only mandate 40. Misclassifying employees as exempt or non exempt for overtime can lead to costly penalties. Independent contractor misclassifications are growing. You can run into a lot of issues, and I think that a lot of people don't recognize that independent contractors are something that could cause you a lot of concern if you don't follow the guidelines properly. So even California has an 8-hour daily overtime regulation. So a lot of us are programmed where it's you don't get overtime unless you work 40 hours a week. California, if I work 1 day a week and I work 12 hours, that's 2 hours of overtime. So understanding they don't just have time and a half, they also have a double time overtime rate. So you got to be aware of all of those things. So your action step for this is I want you to create a simple wage and hour checklist for each state that you want to operate in. Review it with an HR consultant, make sure it's accurate, and then move on. Don't second guess every detail. Just build it out in that way. The next thing you have to recognize is employee benefits and leave policies. Benefits like health insurance, paid leave, workers' compensation are heavily regulated. Some states, like New York, mandate paid prenatal care leave starting in 2025. Others require specific worker compensation coverage. So, understanding those differences when you move into states, because I'll be transparent, there are states that I just can't afford to move into, no matter how good the potential staff are. So, what I find is a red flag is when you'll notice more independent contractors in states where people don't want to employ those people because of that. So New York tends to have a lot of independent contractors because people don't want to be employers of people in New York, as an example. Partner with an HR service, someone that can hold your back. Hint, hint, Wellness Works Management Partners. No, but really find that right partner that can protect you and advocate on your behalf. Set a deadline 1 week to research state specific labor laws. And I want you to update your employee handbook on a regular basis with a single compliant policy that truly covers all your states. So, policies, you want to set a foundation. So, we run our policies based on Los Angeles, California, even for our employees that are in Nevada. Even, when we had employees in Wisconsin, we ran a California based labor law. Now, we made sure we had the strictest labor guidelines. So, if there was something unique to that state, like Wisconsin, that became adopted for all employees. And so, looking at that might streamline and create some efficiency for you. For the past 20 years, I've had the privilege of helping pediatric occupational, physical, and speech therapists redefine the way that their business functions and helping them tap into their entrepreneurial spirit. In recent years, I recognized a deficit, which was bringing private practice owners together with the vision of allowing them to connect, learn, and grow. And Growth Code Conference was born. From sunrise to sunset, we offer an opportunity for pediatric, occupational, physical, speech therapy private practice leaders and owners to connect, collaborate, learn, grow from yoga to breakfast to lunch to coffee carts and more. We take you to another world where you are inspired, where you feel empowered, and where you are able to grow to the next level so that we all can change the world one child at a time. So another thing to look at is anti-discrimination and harassment. Um, every state has its own spin on anti-discrimination and harassment laws. And sometimes you're required to have specific training. New York City, for example, expands protected class beyond federal law, and California is going to require anti-harassment training. These are good things. I'm not saying they're bad things, but you want to be aware of that. Your hiring and training processes need to align with the rules so you can avoid lawsuits. Now, a compliance tip is use standardized compliant interview templates and avoid discrimination questions. And so, even the question that often is asked, which is discriminatory, is, do you plan to have children in the next couple of years? And you may tell me, Brandon, like, I didn't mean it in a discrimination way. And I'm like, it's still discriminatory. It is. You can't ask that question. Now, could you say, what are some personal goals? And if they give that info, great. But the minute you start to allude to, hey, are you planning to have a child? That would be seen as a discriminatory question because you may not hire them because you're afraid of maternity leave. Block 30 minutes to review your hiring process. It's really important that you look at the way that you may have anti discrimination or harassment. Did you know that you could actually be discriminating in your hiring process without knowing it? If you go on LinkedIn and social media to see candidates before you decide to interview them, that could be deemed discrimination if you're not careful. So make sure you know what you're doing. HIPAA and privacy compliance. So one thing that you have to recognize is that as a healthcare practice, you're already familiar with HIPAA, but states may have additional privacy laws. For example, a non-HIPAA compliant website vendor could expose your practice to risk. Some states like California have strict data privacy laws that affect employee and patient data, even on your websites, your ADA websites, all those different things. So understanding what might be state regulated for compliance and IT and different things like that is really, really important. So, the other thing we want to look at when we're entering a new state is insurance contracts, licensing regulations, medical chart review audits. As a healthcare practice, it is crucial to evaluate every single insurance contract. My recommendation is for each state that you set up services in, that you set up a different tax ID. If you're just employing, that's different. But the minute I go with insurance contracts, I want the New York insurance contracts potentially under a different tax ID than the California insurance contracts. You want to look at all the licensing regulations. You want to look at the work comp requirements, the liability insurance requirements, and you also want to look at what a medical chart review audit requirement is for those locations. There are often idiosyncrasies that get missed when not properly evaluating every single variable in that compliance aspect, especially when it comes to the payers that exist. Because I can tell you, it's very different with payers in Texas than it is in Montana. To verify with the state insurance commissioner's office any variable that are unique beyond federal mandates, researching that licensing board, that clinical requirement. Some states won't have certain professions that you don't even know. So I'll give you an example. Let's say, for the sake of this example, you have a speech language pathologist practice and you deliver speech therapy and you decide, I have speech language pathology assistants, and one of your assistants says, I'm moving to this state. Did you know some states don't have that licensure opportunity? So they might not even allow an assistant in that state. So understanding that and building a business plan for each individual location, highlighting the compliance differentials between your human resources, your funding models, your liability, all tax regulations, all of that is really crucial. You should have your CPA look at what the tax burden would be entering that new state. And that kind of leads me to number 8, which is tax planning and corporation infrastructure. As a healthcare practice, you must identify each location's requirements as it relates to corporation infrastructure. LLCs, PLCs, S corps, etc. It's crucial that you work with a great CPA firm because what you need to also understand is some states have specific regulations like California. Typically speaking, you have to be an S corp. Um, they no longer typically will recognize a professional limited liability corporation. They want you to be an S Corp. Um, Again, check with your CPA. The other thing to recognize is that in a lot of states, professional corporations um, must be held by that professional designated licensed person. So the shareholder value must be held by that person. These are things that you want to look at, and you want to make sure you're incorporating that with your lawyer into all of your legal paperwork, etc. So, how to create a uniform approach to a multi state private practice? Strategy one, adopt the strictest state standards as the baseline. States have varying HR requirements, minimum wage, leave entitlements, etc. Adopting the most stringent state, county, city standards as your practices wide policy is going to ensure compliance over all locations, and it simplifies policy management. It's much easier in that way. Research your key regulations. Identify which state or which province or which county or which city has the strictest rules in areas like paid leave, overtime, minimum wage, anti discrimination. Understand that component so that you can implement that. So the minute you move into California, you're getting an 80-hour paid sick leave for some employers, which is higher than many other states. And you may say, well, Brandon, we're only going to do that in California and we're going to do our other states with no. In a way, it creates a discrimination, in my opinion, when you're offering one benefit more than another. So just be aware of that. So we offer everything based on that max capability per state. Don't move into California if you don't want to offer 80 hours of paid sick leave. Create a unified policy. Develop employee handbooks that meet and exceed the strictest guidelines. Now, I want to make sure you understand that when I say develop a single employee handbook, you technically need a handbook for each state. So you do have to have in that handbook a state segment where it's like your California guide, your Florida guide, your Idaho guide, etc. And again, there's nothing that stops you in Florida to following California guidelines, but you still want to allude that you have everything that Florida requires and above and beyond. You want to highlight generous policies as a perk to attract talent. So now when you are operating off of California guidelines, there are places like Florida where employees might actually be attracted to what you offer because it's not a standard in Florida, such as paid sick leaves and different things like that. We want to review this annually or whenever there's a legislative update. You want to look at labor legislative updates and webinars that come out because these things can change mid-year and you have to be able and be ready to update it. Two, I want you to centralize your HR operations with technology. Technology automates multi-state compliance, reducing errors and the need for state-specific policies on a regular basis. So centralized platforms ensure uniform application of policies, payroll, benefits. Implement multi-state softwares like a UKG that supports multi-state payroll, tax compliance, and benefit administration. Automate compliance tracking. Use software to flag state-specific requirements, overtime rules, and generate those compliance reports. Standardize your processes. Make sure that you're configuring software based around your uniform policies, including your onboarding checklist. And then you want to train your staff. Now, one of the things I recognize, a lot of private practices are not employing HR. And I want to tell you this. I think human resources is the lifeline of survival. It is the life vest for your practice. Hire an office manager that is an HR director. Make HR a priority. Prioritize your people by offering HR. And if you can't afford HR, that's why fractional HR exists. Imagine a solution where you can be plug and play. I offer that service. So if you're looking for HR in your practice, we will become your chief HR officer. We will be hiring, firing, policies, procedures, compliance, and more. These are all ways to streamline the way that you function if you can't afford top quality HR. And so it is a priority, and measure twice, cut once. The next thing I want you to do is standardize your employee training and your onboarding. Having uniform training will ensure all your employees, regardless of state, understand policies, compliance requirements, and workplace expectations, reducing legal risks and fostering consistency. So an example, if you're in Texas and California and you only have discrimination training and harassment training in California, there is a chance that you're going to miss it in California because you don't do it in Texas or Florida or wherever you are. So by offering that as a uniform, it just becomes part of your ecosystem. Develop your core training program. Create it in training modules covering HIPAA, anti harassment, workplace policies, benefits, and meet those strictest requirements. Use e learning platforms. There's platforms like I said earlier, Mineral. Standardize your onboarding process, create checklists, create federal and state tax documents using your I-9 process. So we use E-Verify. There's different ways for you to do this, and that will help you optimize your practice specific policies. Update them regularly and train for knowledge. So I want you to gamify your training process. Have them do a Jeopardy. Have them learn and apply that data into the day-to-day task management of their role and showcase their knowledge and their ability to apply policy into real day scenarios. Step 4, partner with a specialized HR service. HR services with multi-state healthcare expertise can design, manage, and create your uniform policies. It can reduce your burden. It can help you grow. So one of my biggest success stories that I'm really proud of is we helped a practice grow from 45 employees to over 100 employees in less than 12 months. That's growth. That's scale. That's expansion. It's possible. Choose a healthcare focused partner. Select services, whether it be HR for health or risk or compliance, but there's different things they can do. And sometimes it's a matter of just hiring the right technology partner, but there's a lot of resources there. Delegate your policy creation. Work with partners to develop a single employee handbook that incorporates each state's guidelines as a separate state handbook within your handbook. Outsource compliance monitoring, having that done, and then regular check-ins, all part of this process. We need to establish a centralized decision-making framework. A clear decision-making process for HR issues ensures consistent application. We don't want to treat one state different than another, and I think it's really important to reduce confusion by having standardized decision-making. I think one of the mistakes we make is we treat each state different. Well, where are they based? So an employee calls in and asks a question. Well, let's look at where they're at. Let's have a centralized decision process. Create your decision matrix. Develop a framework for HR decisions, hiring, termination, leave, approvals, and prioritize compliance with the strictest state in alignment with your practice goals. Designate your compliance lead. Appoint an HR manager or consultant to oversee all multi-state compliance, ensuring that decisions align with your uniform framework. And now you need to document your decisions. Use your centralized system to log HR decisions, ensuring transparency and consistency. Then we want to review outcomes. Analyze those decisions quarterly to identify inconsistencies. And of course, we want to reform and refine our framework. So here are some of the pros of expanding into new regions. We can increase revenue potential. Entering new regions allows access to untapped markets, increasing patient volume, revenue. Example, offering telehealth in a state with a high demand could boost income. Diversifying your income stream can also be really great. Another benefit or pro is attracting top talent. As we expand areas, our recruitment opportunity is really great. A larger, diverse team can enhance service offerings and improve patient satisfaction. Brand growth and market presence. We can operate in multiple states. We can build our brand to new heights. And it's interesting because you got to know what you're trying to do. I was talking to a client 3 days ago. And when I talked to that client, they're growing in all these states, but they're allowing in their acquisition model for the people that they acquire to keep their brand. And I'm like, why? Every brand, well, they're part of our family. And I go, one brand is stronger than 10. We got to build your brand in a uniform way. And I think that's a really, really important. So as we build our brand and market presence in new regions, we just open up opportunities. You never know the way that people will hear and find you. Did you know that according to a 2023 SHRM survey, Companies with HR strategies tailored for multi-state expansion, they reduce legal compliance issues by 32%. They improve hiring speed by 25% across region. Now, one of the things that people ask me is, how do I know when to expand? I'm a big believer that you have to know what your ceiling is, where you're operating, and your capability. So ceiling, capability, and when we've reached 90% of our potential, we look for expansion. Now, sometimes opportunities land in our lap and we go for it. Expanding our workforce from a remote employee standpoint is much easier than expanding our floor plate. So expanding clinics into new states takes a whole different requirement than just expanding top talent. I'm willing to expand top talent when it makes sense, when they can work remote. But when I'm expanding my service delivery into new states, I have to have clear business plans, action plans, funding models, and I have to feel that I've exhausted all of my resources in my current existing infrastructure. As Peter Drucker says, the best way to predict the future is to create it. So I want you to create your future. Thank you for tuning into this episode of the Private Practice Survival Guide podcast. Don't forget, I want you to subscribe. I want you to like us. I want you to share, because together we can thrive, not just survive. Thank you for tuning in to the Private Practice Survival Guide podcast. I'm incredibly grateful to each and every one of you. Exciting news. We're now available everywhere, from Spotify to Apple Podcasts to YouTube, or anywhere you like to listen to your podcasts. So watch, listen, and reach out. If you loved this episode, please drop a 5-star review. It truly means the world to me. Are you looking for more ways to elevate your practice? If so, now is your chance. Reach out, go to my website, or email me at brandon@wellnessworksmp.com. And remember, it's not just about surviving, it's about thriving.